Good morning, Mike. How you doing? Happy Friday.
Good morning, Steve. Yes, Friday. It's
Well,
Friday, and I'm in
you sound a little
love. The
better.
Cure. I was going to sing some Cure for you. That just came to mind. I'm
Wow,
not sure
wow.
why.
That's great. That's great. Well, all I can say is I'm glad you're in a better position than you were yesterday. So that's good.
Yes, I got a good night's sleep last night,
Good,
feeling
good
good,
man.
and I do still have, the two shoulders. I have the angel and the devil on each shoulder, telling me what to think about the future. But if I stay in the here and now, I'm in a good place. It's Friday, and it's the spring, and the weather's good, and let's celebrate that.
Beautiful outside here in New York. It's beautiful. So a little chilly, but it's nice. It's nice. So yesterday you were preparing yourself. You're a little apprehensive. You were doing a huge conference yesterday. 500 people, I
Yeah.
believe, were dialing in, and it was with FMs. So any takeaways, any insights you got, any questions that sort of come out of that sort of surprised you?
Yeah, the Pro FM Credential is the group that was putting this on, profm.org. They are relatively new. A few years ago, they came up with a new credential to help facility management professionals be prepared for the future of the built environment. And certainly, I was educated a lot because there were some great panelists, also inspired by the positivity and the optimism. But at the same time, there were a lot of questions. Boy, I've never been on a live stream where I had to field so many questions at once. So the concerns are a lot of the same things we talk about here when we're talking about workplace, because obviously our FM community and our real estate community combine, along with HR and IT and others. We talked about the collaboration to prepare the workplace for the future, and leadership. Our C-level leaders have to make policy decisions and put into place the big decisions. And then what do? We execute. The real estate and facilities teams and others execute on making these protocols a reality. So a lot of the time yesterday, the hour went by really fast, but it was around things like we've talked about here. What will the social distancing measures look like? Physical space uh, requirements. How will we manage the disinfecting of the facilities, the spaces? Again, it was all driven by helping people be comfortable. There were a lot of questions around the practicality and just what it's going to look like to try to take people's temperature, for example, walking into a facility.
Hmm.
And PPE, will some people, will the requirement be for masks and other things? And will a lot of folks were worried about supplies of disinfectant and PPE still, just to in a practical sense, and vendors not being able to do their jobs, because at least at this point, in many regions, and this is a global town hall. So it was one of those things where it was difficult to get, a one answer for all people, but because you have different requirements, different governmental lockdowns in different places, sometimes facility management itself is not considered an essential service, which is shocking to me, right?
Mm.
So again, it was a really good conversation. I'm happy to share some of those questions with you and get your take on it. But enjoy that a lot. And I know we're getting a lot of requests these days to talk about the future, the near and long term future of our industry. Have you had a chance to think about some of the longer term implications? I think that's where most of my uh, interest was. In yes, there's going to be this near term getting back to work, and we talked about it the last couple of days here, and we'll continue to talk about it because there are so many things to talk about. But the longer term implications, the big changes in the industry, the profession of facility manager, of real estate director. Have you thought any about those things?
I haven't really thought too much long term. I mean, obviously, similar to what everyone in the industry is talking about, what our peers are talking about, who we interact with. Everyone is thinking about, okay, what do we need to do for the next phase? What are the things that we need to do? Landlords are asking what is it they need to do in the long term and somewhat in the future sense, right? So from a landlord's perspective, it's okay, what do we need to prepare people to come back to? We have to do triage, temperature checking, thermal check-ins, do those sort of things. But then longer term, how do they engage and allow employees or tenants to be feel safe and feel secure? And the other narrative that I'm hearing and I'm sort of sensing around is change management and workplace strategy,
Yep.
and how those two are very distinct skills. They're very distinct steps in processes. And it's how do you get one right? So today we evaluate the change management that's needed, or what is the future work style, and then how do you then bridge those two, and how do you bring those two together? So that's something that I've seen a lot more communication coming out on. And it is a very important separation. Now, the question is, what comes first, right? Change management, you can say right now we are in change, we're in total change. And therefore, on the back of that, there's going to be a future change as we slowly migrate back to the office. Some people may, some people not. But then, okay, what does that change management process look like? What does the work style, what does the office, the physical environment look like going forward? And those are the conversations that I'm finding I'm having more and more with my peers. Also internally within the organization, obviously, but with my peers. I'm having a lot more of those conversations. And then also, whenever you start to do these things, what technology do we need to do those things going forward? A lot of organizations may not have invested in technology, workplace tools, hot desking tools, other things that sort of allow people to see air temperature or air cleanliness, and all those different metrics and displays that give people comfort where they may not have been as prominent or as on the forefront of people's minds when it came to capital investment and workplace and facility operations.
Sure.
Will they in the future, and how do we get to that? So that's kind of the sort of front of mind in the conversations that I'm hearing, as we think about that. But the other thing that keeps coming through, is, and as you know, I do a weekly call with Jonathan Schultz, and I did it with him yesterday, and
Oh,
it
awesome.
was it
I
was
haven't
it
seen
was
that one yet.
really, yeah, no, and and it sort of, it was beautifully dovetailed right after I had the conversation with you. So it was really nice. And what we talked about was, in life, there's only actually one thing we can control, and that's our
Okay.
thoughts,
Yeah.
right? So how do we do it? And then we ran through what actually he does each day. What is the goals that he sets himself,
Oh,
and
I
how
like
does
that.
he manage those things, and how has that
Yeah.
changed through this process? And it's he did a wonderful thing in some of the things that he shared. So I mean, take
That's
a look.
great.
It's just go through
Yeah,
it.
I
And
will
again,
check that out because that's
yeah.
exactly what I ended with yesterday, right?
Hmm.
Excuse me. Every morning these days, Steve, my voice is giving me issues, but that's all right. Um, yeah, that anxiety in me builds up. It's an even kind of, or a scale that balances out. The more I think about the future, the more I worry about looking too far ahead, the less I can control, the more my anxiety raises. So, and the more my kind of downward spiral happens, but the more I stay in the moment and stay into the here and now and what I can do, as far as planning for tomorrow, planning for next week, next month, next year. If I could just kind of keep my head around that, it helps me so much better. And the things you just mentioned were all things that I've been thinking about, and certainly we've all been talking about over the last several years in our industry. In my podcast, we talk about things like technology and
Hmm.
trends and investment and selling the value of these tools to organizations. And then we talk about, as a facility management or a real estate leader, being prepared for things. So a lot of and the culture around that. So I think what I took away from yesterday's town hall and what I took away from just your kind of commentary there was that, isn't it interesting that every organization may be in a different place depending on where we were pre-pandemic? If you were in a place where the organization had a great emergency preparedness plan and you were invested in that and you had a great change management strategy, a great workplace strategy, I think you're going to be in a much, much better position coming out of this, quarantine situation and returning to the workplace, returning to the office, because you had plans around that. Whereas many organizations, large and small, didn't have that, didn't invest it, and then also the technology piece. If you had the tools in place, you had a solid IWMS system, or you had other technology automation systems that were employee focused, employee facing, where you were having that the culture where employees had the ability to interact with their spaces, reserve space, control the temperature, control their schedule, the hot desking you mentioned. So if you had those things in place before, I think you're going to be in a much better place to adjust them and continue forward in a more efficient way and the comfort level. But if not, it's not too late. You got to start thinking about that. I think that's what we kind of talked about yesterday, is that if no matter when that reopening takes place, or whenever, in your region, the beginning conversation around returning to the office is going to happen, you need to be planning now and talking with your partners, your suppliers, your vendors now about that, because they may be booked, for many months out as people
Hmm.
begin to add on services and thinking about technologies and tools that they didn't have before. So I'm excited to see where our company goes. iOffice is obviously a workplace management tool, and our I told you I was so impressed early on, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. They didn't jump and do anything right away. They kind of waited to see where the market was going and where we could help our customers best. Well, I know this week we're having a software hackathon about
Mm.
trying to now that we know some of these things that people are thinking about and some of the things we know we'll need to address for our clients and potential future customers. They're doing this hackathon, and I don't know how these programmers do it, but the developers, they get together and play around with ideas and technology tools that can help, add features, add capabilities, integrate the technology into the future workplace. So that should start seeing results here in the next week or two, and I'm excited to see what comes from that.
Yeah, no, that'd be really interesting to see sort of some of the things that you think needed to be developed, right? What are the key areas of focus on what needs to be developed? So hopefully, maybe you get it to share if it's not too top secret,
Yeah,
you know?
I will, as they release that information to us. I'll certainly share
Yeah,
with you here.
yeah, yeah.
Um, as far as the human side of this, me, I'm always falling back on the default. As I was reading those questions coming in during the FM town hall, I could sense there was a lot of, you know, nervousness, anxiety. I'm not sure what the right word is. Just concern that people feel ill-equipped. I think we all feel ill-equipped when we're in a situation that's unusual, and certainly this is unprecedented. So regardless of our role, regardless of our responsibility, I'm sure those watching this can appreciate or empathize or just relate to this. Wow, things are uh, not what I expected, or this is a situation that we couldn't have ever fully planned for. So how do we manage it now going forward? And that was the thing you mentioned. There's kind of there's two schools of or two groups of FM and workplace leaders out there. Those that are busier than ever, like you and I, who are in this space of managing teams and creating uh, virtual content. We're just as effective online. And there's those that are going into the office or managing the building while we're not there, or there's a small skeleton crew there. I think I
Mhm.
told you I'm finding more and more of our FM leaders are continuing to manage at least parts of their campus or parts of their facility. They've closed off certain floors or certain buildings, but there's a crew of essential employees that do continue to come to the physical space, and we can learn a lot from them, I think, as we go forward. But there's this other group that is just home waiting for the call to return to some normalcy, whatever that's going to look like. And in that case, that's where it's an opportunity to upskill, to be preparing, to be training, to be doing things like pursuing a pro FM or
Mhm.
investigating some of these other credentialing or some of these other education opportunities. I've talked to folks in my IFMA community where they're reading books that they just had always wanted to read and they haven't had a chance. They're investigating in certain again, related to their job. Not just trying to do the escape from reality stuff on Netflix that I always talk about, but they're doing stuff to just really enhance their skill set so they're better prepared going forward. And I know you're doing that too. Are you still keeping up? Are you able to find time to read those books and see some of that content you couldn't get to earlier?
No, no, I absolutely am, and making time, right? So I'm consuming less and less news in the morning, and then trying to give that time to content, right? Other types of content, reviewing what is the narrative, what are the viewpoints in our workplace, in our industry. There's so many different perspectives, and whenever you do listen to people and you hear their perspective, similar to what we went through yesterday, right? Where we talked about a social responsibility. Do we have a social responsibility to return to work? To take on some of the other thoughts from people around the world and hear their perspectives and then just mull over some of those things, right? Take a comment, take a question someone poses, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever that may be, and just really mull over that. What does that mean?
Mm,
Right? This
yeah.
morning I was actually thinking through Mark Galbraith, who is the CEO of Liquid Space. He helps co-working locations sell their services.
Okay.
And he's just mulling over just a series of questions. What does the co-working space look like going forward? How do they manage? And just letting that ferment in my head And what does that mean? And, as a workplace, someone who manages a workplace who does utilize co-working, what does that mean for my staff? What does it mean for my peers, my colleagues who operate from those locations? And just allowing that to ferment, and that's sort of how I'm spending my time. But I'd love to go back to what you were saying. And, you mentioned so many questions, and you've been
Mhm.
across and been involved in different panels over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Was the narrative different? Was the questions different? Was the tone different?
Well, it kind of confirmed what we talked about the last couple of days. It's all about this looking ahead to the reopening of the workplace. But what I didn't see there, and I think that needs to be discussed. And again, it depends on the setting. You and I can get into some of the human elements, the anxiety, the psychological and emotional safety issues that
Mhm.
people are going to be facing as they head back into public life, as they head back into the workplace. So the tone was more formal yesterday. I like that as well because and again I was a little overwhelmed by some of the technical questions that came out because I can't address the nuts and bolts of what an FM professional is responsible for. It blows my mind when I think about the expertise of some of the engineering that goes in to the managing the built environment. But we're all people, and I've always celebrated on my show. And you knew this before I did the Workplace Innovator podcast, I did the FM Innovator podcast,
Mhm.
and it was this great community of FM professionals who many were focused on workplace and the strategies around space and managing workplace strategies. But there's also this part of managing the physical campus and so forth. But through it all, it's all about the people. It's one of my guests never forgets said facility management is people management. We bring the buildings along for the ride. It's about the people, the occupants of the facility. So I did steer the conversation towards the end yesterday to kind of address the tone of or the question of how are you doing, in this quarantine, in this period of uncertainty. How are you managing, your well-being, your mental health? I think that's an area that needs to be addressed. It requires a level of transparency and vulnerability that's tough to do when you're in a professional setting and you're talking to your peers or you're talking to your industry or you're putting yourself out there as a industry thought leader. Well, to me, I'm just like I wear my emotions on my sleeve, as you know, and I know we're all struggling in some way, shape, or form. Some days are better than others. Some hours are better than others. But I really think that we need to have those conversations, especially as we think about getting back into the workplace and looking across. I think that. Do you think that the Zoom? We had another happy hour last night. It's been a busy day, a busy week for me. Another IFMA happy hour last night, and the questions came up about these things, about a lot of folks who were really hesitant to turn on their camera before, for conference calls are just everybody's doing it now. And how
Yeah.
comfortable is everybody now? Do you even think twice about it now? I mean, I used to even just a month ago or 2 months ago, it was a big deal for me to say, all right, I'm going to start doing webinars where I put my camera on, my webcam on, instead of me sitting there with my notes and hidden behind a PowerPoint presentation where I get to talk and control things. I just put the camera on, talk to the audience, and if I make mistakes, so be it. And that ability to be just, you know, your true self and your flawed individual self. It's like we're all people. We're all in the same boat, isn't it? Isn't it
Yeah,
true?
yeah. No, no, you're so right. And as you were saying those things, there was two specific scenarios sort of came to my head and through my mind. And one is I didn't really fully appreciate how much I've enjoyed being on video calls, video conferences, and also watching likes of your live stream, right, where it's video and you get to see the participants and you get to see them in their home environment and you get a feeling of connection.
Yeah.
So two instances, I got a phone call the other day, and it was a call for an hour on the phone, and I'm like, "Where's the video? I can't see this person. I can't see the emotions." And it
Yeah.
was only then did it really trigger. Actually, it's quite difficult to have a phone call. Not difficult to have a phone conversation. You get so much more from a video conversation. Yes, you get the audio, but you get to see the visuals, right? You
Yeah.
get to see the tilts of the head, the body language. You get to see all the engagement, right? And you can sort of feel that, and it's really, really special.
Yes.
Also, I tuned into a conference yesterday. I wanted to listen to my good friend Karen Gill, who's brilliant. She's the VP of Workplace at Fidelity.
Yep.
Great thought leader. And I wanted to listen into this and hear her speak. And it was all audio, and but it was an interactive audio. There was polls. There were really it was they did a nice job. But at the same time, it would have been, you felt that there was a little bit of distance because you couldn't physically see the people,
You
and
miss
those
it.
are the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are the two elements that are really, you don't know how much you actually really enjoy that physical connection, or the visual connection, the audio connection, until one's taken away, right? Sometimes people
Exactly.
probably wish you and I, our audio was taken away. Maybe it's both they want taken away, but yeah, but you're so right. You're so right, and there are many things that people are doing, using this in the workplace. I've been people who are holding quizzes because the tools are here. It's easy to hold a quiz, right? Through polls, people playing bingo, lots of different things.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really, really, really cool. It brings people together.
Well, I wonder if that same feeling or that same expectation, I guess is the right word, to our world, now that we've been deprived some of the in-person meetings and some of the conferences and the things that I used to really enjoy and I hope to enjoy again. For a period of time here, I'm almost getting that mindset adjustment where that's not going to happen for a while. The ability to get on a plane and fly to San Francisco
Mm,
or fly to Europe again and be a part of these physical conferences, it may be a while before we get to do that again. So this is good, and these video there's an okay element to trying to share information, but I think you're going to really miss those interactive sessions, the presenter on stage with people sitting around you, and or the breakout sessions where you're with people and talking, and or just standing around an expo hall, chatting with your peers. That is such a thing that we were maybe getting a little bit suspect to. Is like, is that conference model going to change, need to change? Well, by cutting it off like we did here a month ago, and now say we go 6 months or a year without that, and then imagine what it's going to be like when you get back to that scenario, and you're going to say, wow, like having a phone call without audio. It's like, I can't remember having a conference. The virtual conferences were just not as good. We'll look back and say they were good. We were able to get things done, but these virtual conferences just don't compare to the in-person events. Maybe I'm guessing. What do you have a gut feeling about that?
yeah, I suspect, um, conferences, when you go to a conference, they give you two or three things, right? One is obviously the content and the people are there sharing, right? And that's one huge aspect of it. Two is the exhibits, right? You get to see different technologies, different products, and you get to see, feel, and touch, and you get to understand and see the actual company behind those products. But then there's the networking, right? There's the actual face to face, seeing people who you haven't seen in a while and actually sharing and having a coffee, having a dinner, whatever that is. Those are the three elements. Now, to get to that, you have to give up so much, right? You have to be away from your office, you have to be away from the job. And most people are there, as you know, they're on the phone, keeping up with things, calls ongoing
Mhm.
before, after the conference, and so on and so forth. And it is quite, it consumes so much time and energy. So from the virtual perspective, you can break that into segments. So perhaps rather than it being a virtual conference that takes place for 2, 3 days, maybe it's a virtual conference where it's an hour each day, where there's things are just set up for that type of situation. So maybe it's delivered differently. Maybe
Yeah.
the content is different. Maybe the questions and how people interact is different. Who knows? But to your point, do we know that's a better situation or a worse situation? I just don't know. But I do think the conferences will change. And the way you start off your previous question, you teed it off nicely, was you don't know when you'll get on a plane. And this is a question that came up yesterday, on the webinar I was on, and I was
Yeah.
really surprised. So the question was, when do you think you will get on an airplane again? And there was May, June, July, August, September, November plus. There were people that selected May. There were people that selected June. People selected July. And I want to say those 3 months combined probably outweighed those that said November and beyond, which really surprised me. So
Hmm.
I think there are people who are very keen to get out, get about, travel, and then I think there are others that are a little more reluctant. Now, it's similar to the questions that you put forward from your live stream. Do you know the geography, right? When you had a 50-50 split, is there a geography? And I'd love to have seen the geography of that poll yesterday. Are the people who are May, June, July, where are they located? Are they in New York? Are they in California or any other area that's been hardly hit? Or are heavily hit, sorry. Or are they in a geography where actually there's been very little penetration or exposure to COVID-19. I don't know. I'm just curious to understand the psychology behind some of those things, you know?
That is fascinating to me too. Which is more comforting. I almost feel like if I was in New York like you, and you are coming, you're at the peak or the flattening, and it's going to be start trending down, and the fact that you were hit so hard, and you imagine so many people were exposed to COVID-19, and it was certainly a challenge for a long time, but there's almost a positive that comes from that. It's already been there. It's
Mhm.
already a certain level of herd immunity that may have taken place. I almost feel more comfortable in New York than I would say in a place in the country that has not been hit yet. And if they try to reopen, and all of a sudden there's a lot of folks that have not been exposed yet, these are the things we just don't know. And I guess that's going to be the constant challenge, is to put everything into perspective, and to weigh the risks. So again, I'm hoping, again, I keep looking for the data, the bigger picture data, and without testing, without all the things that we still are trying to get to. And I know that's the priority right now. As just yesterday, the presidential task force, and I haven't had a chance to really dive deeply into it, so maybe we'll talk about it more next week. But the phases of reopening the economy, depending on which part of the country you're in, is a three-phase process. And I just did a glance at some of the principles, and it's going to be this new, reality where we have masks on, and we have to go back, maybe sit in a restaurant where the waiter's wearing a mask and gloves, and there's certain protective things happening, and the spreading out and the distance in public, and certainly in our workplaces, is going to be, some of those features are going to be carried into the workplace as well, and it's all about creating comfort. So there's going to be this incredible discomfort for me anyway, and I'm sure for most of us, when you see somebody with a mask, I still get creeped out by it. I just don't like it. And it doesn't, I hope that there's going to be some really cool, innovative, fashion company that comes up with some really neat looking mask that does the job that we need it to do, but it's also not going to immediately put you into a mindset of medicinal. That's the surgeon mask, the green, that light green surgical mask that everybody's wearing. It's like, I just don't, for a
Yeah.
public, if you're trying to get into some kind of happy place of going to a restaurant for a nice meal, you don't want to have your surgeon standing over the table. So there's some psychological elements there that I think we need to address. But somebody said, I
Yeah.
heard this just said as a lighthearted thing. Somebody said that, the Kardashians or somebody's going to find some stylistic, face mask, face covering that's going to set this new trend, ablaze. And all of a sudden it's going to be, I got to get that mask. That's the one that really is
No,
cool.
it's before you even went into that, that's where my head was. It was kinda like, so I'm out running, I says, How long will it take for Nike to create one that actually allows you to breathe in and out and restricts everything? You know how it
Yeah.
is, but,
Yeah.
but anyway,
So
so
we'll figure it out.
yeah,
We're innovative people, and creative people, and certainly if there's an economic driver, if you create a new cool trendy fashion, you're gonna find that. So we'll figure that out, and we'll be comfortable. Just like I was the first time going to Home Depot and standing in the line and being uncomfortable. The next time it's going to be less uncomfortable, and it's going to get something that we get used to very quickly.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I think it's going to happen in the workplace as well. It's going to happen at conferences. It's going to happen getting on planes. It's going to happen, and it's going to become like a calculated risk that we go through our brain, and depending on who we are and how we process information, we tell ourselves stories. Right, that's the key. We tell ourselves stories to make ourselves feel comfortable, and hopefully, it's not an irrational story. It's one based on information that's real. And and I worry as much about the person who wants to get on a plane, right now, and throw all caution to the wind. I worry as much about that person as I do as about the person who says, I have to have evidence of 0 cases of COVID-19 and 100% assurance that I'm never going to get it before I step out of my house again. So the
yeah,
two extremes are both, I think, impractical. And that's where it's going to be really a challenge, just this middle
yeah,
ground of finding a balance of risk, reward, comfort, psychological safety, and really, wise decision making. Let's not put the society, as you said yesterday, what's our obligation to society? We have to
Right.
we have to support our economy for the people who need to work, and we need to get back into engaging with Joe's Cafe. He's going to be really happy when he hears that we talk about Joe's Cafe every week. But hopefully,
Everyone's
I'll be having breakfast there soon.
I hope so too, and everyone's going to be going, "Where's Joe's Cafe? Give us a map,"
I'll do
But
it.
Mike,
I'll
look,
do it.
I want to thank you once again as we close out this week. It's been a great week of conversations.
It
Very, very
has.
different. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, but roller coaster also of content. The 6 feet office we started with. Why do we need to go back to work if we can work from home? And then, as you mentioned, our social responsibility. Do we have one to actually go back from home? And then today, just wrapping all that up. So it's been great. Thank you. I really, really appreciate these chats, and I appreciate seeing the emotional roller coaster that we're both on. So,
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. We'll do it
all right,
again next week.
for
Have
sure,
a good
man, for
weekend.
sure. Have a great weekend. Take care, man.